Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, friends, colleagues, listeners, and anybody new to the podcast. Welcome, welcome. Now, today's guest is a man who I haven't met for very long, but I also made a commitment that he looks like a man I would trust, but he's definitely a man who cares. And the gentleman I'm talking about, and I hope I pronounce his name correctly, is Ryan Goertzen. And Ryan is the Vice President, Maintenance Workforce Development with AAR, and he's also the President of Choose Aerospace. Ryan, welcome and thank you for coming on board.
Chris, thank you so much. What an opportunity to be with you guys.
And now you're under a little bit of pressure because now everybody else is looking, they're going to say, would I trust him that quickly?
God, I hope so. I said it right before the show, Chris. I thought that was a little bit quick, but I'm going to try to do my best.
Well, I'm going with Daniela. So, you know, she was the one who inspired me to have a look at you from a different angle. And now I'm there. I'm fine. So, Ryan, please, can you just give us a little bit of background as to what you do and what your accountabilities and responsibilities are?
Absolutely. I started at AAR in August of 2018 as the Vice President of Maintenance Workforce Development. And that's a new position to AAR. It's a position that our CEO, John Holmes, has really made a very important platform in his leadership of making sure that we create the pathways and invest in the workforce that we need to, turn airplanes through our maintenance, repair, and overhaul facilities. So that was my primary mission at AAR, is to really work with, the pathways programs in colleges and universities throughout the country to make sure that we have, the people that we need and the technical talent that we need to, keep airplanes safe and airworthy.
Which is brilliant. Now, one of the things that I love about what you're doing, and a couple of the points we were talking about, is the care side of the business. So obviously, John cares passionately about getting the right people and also giving people a chance. Now, quite a large proportion is also to do with military transition. So from coming out of military into civilian, and then also in colleges to help them make the right path and convince them, or to teach them and tell them why they're making that decision. So if you want to, can you just, a couple of those programs, can you expand on it?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the first programs that I worked on is with Olive Harvey College in South Chicago. And that program was that we implemented. It was a sheet metal program, and it was focused on aviation sheet metal. It was a short program, roughly 60 days in length, and it provided an opportunity for those people that might not be able to go to a traditional, 2-year or 4-year university because they're already working or whatever the case may be, is to really help them transition to a career they never thought possible. And it was also an opportunity for us to really push the message that we have within our organization is to really work as one, to be inclusive, and to focus on underrepresented populations in aviation. As you know, aviation is predominantly, white men, and we wanted to really target and focus on people of color, women in aviation, technical aviation careers. And so we kind of started with Olive Harvey in that sheet metal program. It's been very successful. We've run 3 cohorts of students through that program. We've hired students right out of 60 days worth of training into both our Rockford facility as well as our Indianapolis facility. We also then started to work very closely with Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University.
Oh, yeah.
In what they set up is the first ever maintenance skill bridge program. And this is a program in which it runs 9 weeks. It's in right now it's at Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. And the students are actually active duty. They're assigned to go to school as they transition out of the military, and they're getting very, very specific skills in the civilian aviation world to help them get certified through FAA certification, as well as we provide GenFam training for them on a Boeing 737 that allows them to really transition into our company very quickly out of the military. We also done a lot of other things with some other schools that I know we'll talk about here.
Yeah. But I think that's a lovely thing. And you spoke there about, what's the perception of aviation, and that it's a one brick wall, so as to speak. But if you take families and teams and groups, the more diverse, normally the better the end result. So it's a great thing that you're doing, and I think it's fantastic, and especially in areas where people don't ever think they're going to get the chance to go into a business like that.
That's exactly correct. I mean, if you take a look at aviation, I mean, I grew up in Nebraska on a farm, and I had nobody in my family that had ever been in aviation, and I had to kind of navigate the aviation world, myself. And one of the things that I'm trying to do at AAR is to help people realize that this is a pathway for them. There is, they are smart enough, they are capable, they are able to go down this pathway. It's just nobody's shown them, the path. And a lot of what I've been focused on throughout, my time at AAR is to really educate the people on the pathway is there and it is for them.
And with the mix between college, between coming out of military, obviously you got different age target groups, yeah?
Correct. I mean, we have a targeted group through our Eagle Career Pathway program that's really, your traditional college student, an 18-year-old coming out of high school that's going to a private school or a community college or a university. That's one path and one group of people. You obviously have the folks that are coming out of the skill bridge programs that are 4 to 8 years or even longer in the military. That's another path. And then I think one of the most important paths are those that maybe haven't done any education, that just went to the workforce and maybe are now laid off or they're underemployed. And we really wanted to get that targeted group also into a pathway by which very quickly they can transition out of whatever career they were in into an aviation career without having to go to school for a long period of time. And so that's another demographic of people that are critical to providing the feed that the industry needs, to keep the workforce vibrant.
Okay. And from a local, state, and national perspective, do you get government support? You get a lot of initiatives that are taken on board by various state governors or mayors or from the national political parties?
So we do see funding specifically to the student, whether it's a Title IV funding through a normal Department of Education loan program, or whether it's workforce funding. There's a lot of state workforce boards that have funding, or educational systems that have funding that can provide transitional funding for people going to courses like we're doing in Olive Harvey, for example, to pay for 60 days of training, which is about $2,500 or so. That can be covered through federal grant dollars.
Okay, which is fantastic. And do you have like your own formula or your own sort of set of triggers? So when you see people come on the courses, whether or not they're going to make your standards or your grade.
So the relationship that we have with a lot of our Eagle Pathway providers, which range from private schools to four-year universities, it's an MOU that we have set up, and it's a formal relationship that is set up between us as a company and them, the educational provider. And so, we define out who is eligible. There's an application process. The application is reviewed, and then there's an exception that or acceptance letter or email that goes to the students and puts them in officially into the program.
Okay, so that's very supportive. Now, something which is probably a little bit trending at the moment. There seems to be a tug of war between the younger generation and the older generation with this damn COVID-19. So you've got one that's eager to get out there, earn money, start families, start progressing through life, and they're being held back. And then you've got the other ones who are so frightened that what they've done and what they've achieved and their life itself is being threatened. how do you see that now developing the way things are materializing as a result of this particular pandemic?
I think it's, obviously we're in difficult times, as an industry. And I think we approach it at AAR with, there's nothing more important to us than our workforce and trying to maintain that workforce along that entire spectrum. I think that for us, it's about how do we invest on the front end to continue to ensure that people see aviation as a viable career path, right? Because we don't want to stop all the work that has been done, right? While at the same time recognizing that for a period of time, right? Maybe it's 2 to 3 years, which is what I'm hearing. Recovery might be. What can we do in the transitional time that's going to keep as many people as we can on the payroll, and as well as also recognizing that many industry or many people or organizations are looking to at early retirement options. I think the concern we have is when you do that, tremendous amounts of knowledge leave our industry, and it's what programs can we put in place to figure out how to get that knowledge back as we recover from COVID-19.
I think that's so important, and I consider myself and a lot of people I know in the Silver Fox Brigade. But what I've found, and I've had some people on the podcast, and they say that the aviation industry is fantastic when you're in it. You've got so much common ground with others and lots of things to talk about, lots to learn, etc. But when you make the decision to leave or to retire, it's almost as if people have started to close the door and they forget you even when you're there. And that last 6 months to 9 months can be quite a lonely time for a lot of people if they don't feel that they've been appreciated or recognised. Now, if you could get that Silver Fox Brigade to feel special, but also to understand that wealth of knowledge they've got upstairs in the loft, if they were able to pass that openly and enjoyably to the younger generation so that they could cherry pick what they needed from that chest of knowledge, it would be a fantastic mix. And it's the mix that we really set up within our own facility even prior to COVID-19, right? Which was a system in place where we could, and we call it step level progression of how do we take a new person, pair them with somebody that's highly seasoned that can help them learn the tricks of the trade, where you might be able to be more efficient in this area versus this area, and so it's a lot of taking that, and it's a challenge, right? Of how do you keep all that knowledge from leaving when you know that knowledge is going to be also necessary for when we recover and when we get back growing again as an industry. And so I know from AAR's perspective, it's very much it's something we think about all the time. It's my job to figure out how to make sure that we keep the workforce, in the right mix of new people coming in and seasoned folks that we need to keep certain knowledge in capabilities before they completely retire. So it's definitely a challenge, and it's a balancing act, especially with COVID-19. Yeah, no, I agree. I'll tell you what, I'm definitely going to use that term. What did you say? Highly seasoned. What was it?
Seasoned.
But what you said?
I like.
what was the word you put before it?
Highly skilled. Is that?
No, I think it was highly. I think you said highly seasoned. So the next time anybody asks me my age, I'm going to say I'm highly seasoned. So I love that one.
Yeah, I like seasoned. You just take away.
Yeah, I'm beginning to like it now as well.
Yeah, there you go.
Now with this COVID-19, okay, and some of the things that I'm trying to do, and my background's in cargo, and most people now have suddenly realised, that the supply chain and everything that we take for granted in life has to come from somewhere and has to get somewhere. So now all of a sudden there's a lot better appreciation of cargo and how important it is that the things we take for granted are actually appreciated and understood. Now, with that in mind, one of the things I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get representative bodies to take into account how to keep people attached to the business as it right sizes. And even though it's a tough thing to say to people that, you know, companies have to right size, they do, because pre-COVID there was quite a few problems creeping into the boardrooms, into senior managers, risk assessments. There was a lot of problems in the overall industry before COVID.
Well, I think that, yeah, I mean, I think AAR as a company, as its history, you know, it's over 60 years of history, is a very conservative company. We make, you know, very, very sound decisions as an organization. And I know for us, you know, we recognized the need to invest, you know, obviously in our workforce specifically, you know, really way before we ever even heard of COVID-19 or you know, two years ago in specifically. And so I can't speak for other industries and some of the decisions that they made, but I think as a company, you know, we recognize, yes, there's going to be some right sizing that has to happen today. We are helping our folks find other opportunities, you know, whether it's in different facilities, because believe it or not, we actually are hiring in some of our facilities. And so we're definitely trying to do that internally as much as we possibly can. And then, you know, and also recognize that this is a broad industry. And a good example of that is what we're doing with Embry-Riddle with our Skill Bridge. We didn't want to stop that program, but we recognized that a big part of that program was hiring the students when they got finished. Well, we couldn't hire at this point in time. And so we partnered with Northrop Grumman. We partnered with Lockheed Martin because they were hiring. And so they've come on to kind of take up the slack for us, so to speak, because we couldn't hire right now. That's, I think, the kind of the dynamics that we as an industry have to recognize, that when it comes to the workforce, we're all in it together. We have to be in it together. And that's the approach that I know we're taking here at AAR.
And obviously they trust the formula, the setup, the systems that you've worked with for a long time.
Correct. Absolutely.
See, I knew I'd get that word trust in.
You got it in, Chris.
No, but fair play to you. No, but it's so important with caring about people. Now, as far as business continuity and sustainability is concerned, and succession management, what's the sort of attrition level of the the people that go through your programs?
So I think maybe if I can digress just a tad, I think one of the things that's interesting about our business is we naturally had attrition, just because students would come out of a college into an MRO and then into an MRO to an airline, right? Yeah. So we just naturally lost people on the through our company, and that was we recognize that, and we've embraced that as an industry, knowing that we train people for other and so we really have that model, and we really embraced it as a company and recognized that that's what we had to do. And so when you look at that model and knowing that you as an organization are set up to just naturally lose people and then bring people on to take over those people because they're moving on, I think it really helps you kind of, yes, there's a lull, right? And I think I can't stress that enough. I feel like, and it doesn't negate the fact that people are hurting today, people are struggling today, and so on. And I know the collective industry recognizes it, and we're doing things to get people back as fast as we can. But I think to your point, it's very much in line with how do we, what we've continued to invest. And I think that's the important part, because investment in people also helps you on the attrition side. And so I think we've done a lot of things as a company through additional training from our leadership perspective. We've hired internal people that are doing leadership training, to changes in benefits, to things of that nature, that, it's not just one thing that you can do as a company to retain folks. And I think we're doing, And that's the unfortunate thing about COVID-19 is AAR was doing so many wonderful things as an organization, just prior, to really turn, really focusing on that workforce that now we've just kind of put a pause on a few of those things, but we also recognize that we can't stop. We cannot stop the pipeline.
No, you mustn't. And also, time will come, and it's just about the timing as well, because if you do it right ahead of certain signs and triggers, then you'll be able to have everybody prepared for when the reboot comes along again.
Well, and I think that's the thing. I mean, we've had a lot of conversations in Congress because at least in the United States, one of the things that's very unifying in our Congress is workforce and workforce development based initiatives. And, for us, if you're talking about affecting 2 years from now, right, you have to do things today, because it takes 2 years to create a technician through a community college, takes 4 years through a university. Well, that means that we have to be doing things right now, because we're not going to reap the benefits of the things we do now 2 years from now, when we all hope that the industry is recovered at least, 80 to 90% or hopefully 100% 2 years from now.
Yeah, no, I agree. And coming back to that attrition and your open recognition of it, it's almost as if your purpose is to give people a chance and to invest in people. And by doing so, that they're going to move on into different ways, and you're going to keep the mill wheel turning and turning. You're going to keep turning people out. So it must be a lovely thing to know how many people have gone through your system and are now working effectively and professionally and successfully within the business.
Well, and that was the whole premise of the Eagle Career Pathway program, is to really create opportunities for people who never considered aviation as an option.
Yeah.
It is to grow those folks while they're in the technician role, and to roles outside of the technician, to roles in management, maintenance operations, quality control, safety, and maybe to another company. And that's okay too, right? And I think when you as an organization embrace that as almost your culture, right, of creating those opportunities, you're going to keep some and you're going to lose some, but the industry is going to gain. And I think that's the most important part is, I kind of think about it, Chris, to aviation safety. 40 years ago, airplanes crashed all the time around the world. And it wasn't until we as a collective body of aviation professionals got together and said, hey, let's start sharing data. Let's start telling on each other through voluntary programs. Let's start doing things that's going to positively affect the aviation safety of the world. And now we've got some of this, at least in the United States, the safest mode of transportation in the world. And it's because we work together. Yeah. And I think around workforce, I think it the same way. If as long as we as an organization know that what we created was a pathway for somebody into aviation, and they either stayed at AAR or they went on to United. And now United is getting the benefit, right? That's okay. Yeah. And that's an okay thing. So
well, they've always got a bit of DNA of AAR, and they'll always have those memories of where they came from. And that in itself is a lovely thing, if that's part of your purpose, which obviously it is, because it's part of the whole dynamic of your business.
Well, and I say I'm a prime example of that. I actually started with AAR in 2008 as the director of training in Oklahoma City. I then went to be the president of a technical college, and now I'm back at AAR. Right. So I can't tell you how many people leave and come back also into different positions. And that's definitely part of the career progressional path that we all have done. Right. Anybody in aviation has done something like that. And being able to kind of explain that to mom and dad and a high school counselor of this is how it works, I think is really what is beneficial to our industry.
Oh, brilliant. You mentioned Oklahoma there. I had a brother who used to live in Ada, Oklahoma. He got married there.
No kidding. Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. So I actually did Oklahoma City for about 3 years where I worked for AAR. And then I did, as the president of Spartan College of Aeronautics and Technology, I was the president there in Tulsa. That school started in 1928, believe it or not. And And so I've spent quite a bit of my time, in the state of Oklahoma. Great state of Oklahoma.
Yeah. I'll never forget Ada.
Yep.
Now, as far as you yourself now, okay, and obviously you come across people and you can see that they're really enthusiastic and happy doing what they're doing. They care about what they're doing. They've got an engagement and an enthusiasm, which that just pours out of you. But what is it that gives you the most satisfaction in what you do?
For me, it's, and it really started when I was at Spartan College, when you got to see what education can do for folks. And I think, whether it be, a military veteran coming out of Iraq or Afghanistan who lost friends and, they sat in your office and cried about what has happened, and you've invested in that person, or they came out of an inner city where nobody in their family had ever gone to college. Nobody had ever really amounted to, a major career, and went job to job, and you saw how education changed lives. It's no different when you're in industry. We provide truly transformational change for a lot of folks who never thought possible to be in a $2 billion company, and see themselves progress to the level that, whether they started out in a 60-day program and they're now leading a major airline project that we have. To me, that's the delight, is to really create that, that true opportunity in people. So that's what gets me excited every day, and really pushing, the envelope of what I think industry involvement has traditionally been. I think one of the things our industry hasn't been very good at is really that outreach. We've always been able to kind of grant, we've always been able to kind of just get by. And I think that other industries have definitely surpassed aviation, and we need to, really collectively really move us back together, which is why I'm now the president of Choose Aerospace, right? That's the mission of Choose Aerospace, is to really align the entire industry, in this workforce discussion to ensure that we have a viable and vibrant group of skilled people that are going to be needed as we recover and as we grow as an industry.
No, that's fantastic. And when you go to college, it's amazing. I mean, like I say to people, there's no one that I know in cargo sat in a school classroom and said to the teacher or to their friend, when I finish school at whatever level, I can't wait to get into cargo. Nobody even knew what it was. You just fall into it, and then once you're in it, it's an amazing thing, because that aeroplane that everybody looks out of when they're on the runway ready to take off, and you look at another, it's very hard to explain to people how many businesses evolve around that aircraft on the ground.
Right.
And once you've been part of it somewhere, and you get your license and you understand the safety, the security element, the regulatory compliance, it's the same everywhere.
Right.
So for somebody coming in, the opportunities to globalize and to see this small planet we live on as much as you can, it's an incredible opportunity.
It is. And I think so much of aviation, I always say, happens behind the security fence, right? You can't get to it. You can't see it. You're constantly questioned, what are you doing here? And unfortunately, because of that, people have a perception, right, of what aviation really is. And that perception is maybe I rode on an airplane once or twice, right? And that's my entire perception of the aviation business. And I always say, every airplane that sits on a tarmac, there's 20 to 40 other people necessary in order to get that airplane to actually move off the gate and actually fly somewhere, right? And I think another reason I pushed the Eagle program in the development was marketing is our problem. When you're marketing aviation to a high school counselor, a principal, somebody involved in a student's life, a young son or daughter's life, right? You have to explain this, right, in a way that is, they can comprehend, right, and is simple enough for them to comprehend, because you and I know just the vastness of the ocean of aviation, right?
Yeah, it's incredible. Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's easy for us to talk it, but when you're talking to a high school counselor who's influencing students to go into or choose certain careers, you got to simplify it and make it easier for them to explain, because ultimately, you know, this is a six-figure career, right? I mean, you don't start there, obviously.
Yeah.
I'm not saying, you know, don't quote me on that, right? None of us.
I was going to say there'd be a lot of people jumping and say, yeah.
Wait a minute, Ryan said I'm going to make, yeah, I mean, all of us, you know, recognize that there is a natural progression of positions that, if you so choose, is a six-figure career. And I think that most people don't understand that. Most people don't realize, you know, what 100%. That looks like.
Yeah, 100%. So, now something else from you know, the teams of people that you bring through. Another great thing is the fact that they have to work under extreme pressure at certain times. And also they've got a huge amount of accountability and responsibility, and they understand the difference between accountability and responsibility, normally because they've got some SMS training and they understand what a just culture is like with reporting, etc. Now, that is so important to teach people that it's okay to make mistakes as long as you report it and as long as you learn quicker than you do making continual mistakes.
Absolutely. I mean, what got me to AAR initially was I actually ran Air Wisconsin's ASAP program on the maintenance side. And when I moved to AAR in Oklahoma City, I actually not only was the director of training, but I also developed their ASAP program. And you're exactly correct. I mean, it's a culture by which you have to instill that it's okay to raise my hand and say, I made a mistake, and know and be disciplined as a company to know that to operate within that system, there's the right level of discipline and the right level of corrective action. And when you do that, right, you get to be the safest mode of transportation in the world, right? And we know that airplanes, unfortunately, especially with the MAX situation, you know, things have happened. But when you look at it as a collective whole, way safer to be on an airplane than it is on your car or motorcycle or even riding a horse, for that matter. So to instill that in our folks, you know, what's great is our 147 maintenance schools. You know, they teach human factors. They you know, some of them even have SMS systems that they've incorporated themselves. We as an AAR are implementing throughout our varying facilities SMS programs, you know, official programs. But we've obviously done human factors, just culture, and those things that are absolutely critical, because you know lives, not just your life is at stake, but so many other lives are at stake, and it's part of the cool thing about being in aviation. I mean,
it is, but I think also people that have gone through that, and I don't want to sound too deep or anything, but a lot of people actually, they learn it and then they understand it. And when they do understand it and they understand why, not just what you've got to do, where you've got to do it, how you've got to do it, when you've got to do it, but understand why you're doing it, it makes people start to think of things outside of their business life. And the thing I always say, one of the greatest days is when you become a parent, but it's also the first day that you learn to become a safety professional. Because as soon as that child starts to walk, nobody tells you, but you take away all the coffee tables with sharp edges, you put stairs, you sort your stairs out, you take your medicines out of the bottom cap, you do all of that without being told. And what I say to some people is, what do you do when you come to work? You leave that head at home. What's the matter with you? You know, you've got to do the same sort of things. And when people understand that and they take that into everyday life, then their expectations of other industries become higher, which is good because it drives standards, and everything starts to materialize.
No, listen, having 3 boys myself, I totally understand the father analogy, definitely. And I think you're absolutely correct. I mean, it's very, very critical that, you know, there's obviously correlations. And I always say, you know, every time I go into an aviation school, one of the worst classes people want to talk about is the regulations class, right? they're going, oh, it's so boring and all this, to me, that's the most exciting class there is, because once you understand the regulation and you understand how 121 operates within 145 and 147 is the training module as it applies to Part 65, and you start to understand these interrelationships of the regulations that we all know,
yep.
Bad things happen to create them. So the more we know them as an individual, the more understanding of them we have, the more likely we are from a behavioral perspective to follow the procedures that are outlined, whether it's an aircraft maintenance manual, whether it's a non-routine or routine task card, whatever the case may be, right? We know why we're doing it.
100%. Yep.
Totally agree. Totally.
And what you said, for people to know why, and very simply, it's because bad things did happen, which made it necessary to create them. So whatever you do not repeat some of those old issues.
And I got to say, Chris, one of the concerns I have is when I go into an aviation maintenance classroom, and when you don't have aircraft accidents very often, people lose sight of the fact that of this, this interdependence upon regulations and all that stuff kind of caused us to be where we are today. I mean, I went into a class the other day and I said, hey, guys, have you ever heard of the Concorde? No one even raised their hand. They never even heard of the Concorde. Well, if you stop and think about it, that accident of the Concorde happened in 2005, right? These were little kids in 2005, right? And so they would have no recollection of very key accidents that have taken place that have changed the industry, right?
Yeah.
And so it really, and once again, I go back to that seasoned workforce, right? That's why they're so important, because they've lived through that massive change in culture that to where we are today. And they're very, very critical to ensuring the long-term success of our industry.
And being a highly seasoned industry veteran, it makes it even more important not to be overlooked. But no, you're right. And that balance, because what I can't remember who it was we were talking to. We were talking to somebody, and afterwards I was saying to Salem, it made sense that if you look at what's happened over the last, say, 30, 40 years in the aviation industry, there's been so much learning and so much development. And then all of a sudden, you've got a newer generation who they already know that because they've gone through a much better educational background. They've got different focus, but they're impatient because they already know that the wheel works. They know it goes round. So, you don't have to stand back and be in wonderment about it. And then they want to move faster. So that balance between the two generations is a very, very fine skill. And it's a very fine science now that I think has to be carefully transitioned, and especially now because of what's happening with this COVID. So moving now, and it's a terrible thing, and this is a great opportunity, especially with traditional heroes. When I grew up, hero always had a uniform, and you always called them super something or super something else. Heroes still have uniforms now, and whether it's people who are in the fire brigade, the police, nurses, doctors, they're real heroes, and obviously military as well. But now with this, with what's happening now, it's going to totally change people's ideas of what to look forward to. So as we're coming near to the end of the podcast, what would you say to all youngsters out there? What is there to look forward to?
Well, to me, I always look at the greatness of a career or of an industry. And to me, I think the best is still in front of us. I mean, I think one of the coolest things that just happened was SpaceX launched a rocket with 2 astronauts to the International Space Station, bringing back, space flight. I mean, a lot of us got into aviation, at different times, whether it was the space race. For me, it was Top Gun. For some reason, I like Top Gun for some reason. But, now
something to do with Kelly, I would imagine.
It's got to be. And now there's going to be Top Gun 2, which unfortunately COVID has put a hold on until December. But, I really look at there's going to be tremendous opportunities. You look at our industry going into COVID-19, it was the most financially successful as it's ever been, at least on the U.S. side. And I think the health of our industry is really makes this a whole lot different than the 9/11. It makes it a whole lot different than the 2008 financial crisis in America. And so I really think when I look at the experts and I say 2 to 3 years, I have to believe them. But I think that even if it's that, what's going to happen? People will still travel. Cargo still needs to be sent around the world. And all these opportunities are there. And I look at it also, we, at least on the aviation side in really America and probably throughout the world, the average age of a technician is 54. And 50% of the technician workforce is between 50 years old and 70 years old in America, at least licensed certificated technicians. And with that being said, we know that, there's just naturally going to be record numbers of retirements that are going to happen, continue to happen over the next 10 to 15 to 20 years. And yes, COVID has been a disaster, but the industry will recover. And I think the opportunities, if I'm going to school and I'm 18 years old and I got to sit in school for the next 24 months,
I see what you're saying.
Enjoy my time, right? Yeah. Knowing that during that time, the industry is recovering. And when I get out, it should be right at the perfect time. So to me, I continue to encourage, I continue to push the work that AAR has been doing, throughout all of our Eagle schools, but also, any chance I get into aviation.
Yeah, no, that's a great approach, a great outlook. And like through all crisis brings out character, and it might be a good program there to have a buddy system now with somebody who's in, they got 2 years to go and others have got 2 years left. It'd be a great way of transferring things. Now, everybody needs a bit of protection or a bit of something to relate to. And I know people are going to be looking at you and they're going to be looking at that Rhino in that corner. And we've had the privilege of seeing you got the big 5 over your right shoulder.
Yeah, I got the big 5. Yep, I sure do.
Yeah, and then you've also got the 101st on your left shoulder.
Yep.
So it reflects well, eh? The business out there is a jungle, and you need a good team and a good bunch of reliable guys to look after the business.
You couldn't have, Chris, you could not have said it better. I mean, both of them have significant meaning to me. Obviously the African one a guy I met on an airplane, believe it or not, 9 years ago. And we've really had a tremendous relationship. I've helped send his kids to school, through college, and, really helped him, in ways that have just been really fulfilling to me. And then, military for me has always been lots of people in my family that are in the military, and they've always, 26% of AAR's workforce has been in the military, and it's a very big passion of mine, but also our organization as a whole. And, I think two representations definitely of who I am, for sure.
It's lovely. It's lovely. And Ryan, you're a man who cares. And what you've just said now about the African issue, of which I know a little bit more, is fantastic. And anybody who does that genuinely, they deserve to be applauded as well. So fair play to you. And you and your company, and I'm sure John, your CEO, is also a fine man with regards to those ambitions and purpose of pumping as many people as possible through your organisation to keep the blood running within the aviation industry, and especially with the diversity and backgrounds. It's a great opportunity to bring people from all corners who never thought they would get into such a wonderful industry. And it really is a great industry with a great future. And that's the positive message we need to leave with regard to this damn CV-19.
Yeah, I couldn't say it better, Chris. I mean, you're exactly right. I mean, we were an industry in crisis from a workforce perspective in February, and then COVID-19 hit 15 days later. And so we have to remain vigilant, I think, as an industry. We have to, retain as many folks as we can and continue to promote the great industry that it is. Because I just, for me, it's just been, I've gone through furloughs of 9/11. I've gone through the ups and downs of the industry, and I wouldn't, as a, on a personal level, I can't imagine doing anything else. And so My passion is definitely, obviously, is high, and I know is felt by you and others. But I think it's definitely something that we have to continue to push, because other industries are doing the same.
Exactly.
And they're taking that skilled workforce that we need, and we need to do better as a collective industry to make sure they choose aviation and choose aerospace.
Yeah, and we have to keep all those good people with us as well, which is so important. Thank you, sir. It's been an absolute pleasure. And, like I said, the most important thing, you definitely come across as a man who cares and an organisation who cares. So fair play to you. Great success. And please God, things will be much, much better in the future.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Chris, and to your entire team. I really appreciate participating today.
Thank you, sir. All the best.